Hello and welcome to Bonhill Geography. In today's video we'll be looking at energy in the UK and focusing on resource management. Now energy doesn't just include electricity, it includes electricity, heating, transportation and industrial manufacturing. While industry has declined in the UK, the need for electricity, heating and transportation, energy security have continued to increase, and they'll continue to do so into the future. For much of the 20th century, fossil fuels powered Britain. Coal was king, followed by oil and natural gas. But over the last 2 decades, the balance has shifted dramatically. Today, renewables generate more electricity than fossil fuels, with wind power leading the way. It's important to mention, however, that this transition has not happened overnight. It's the result of policy changes, technological advances, and a growing awareness of climate change. The UK is now one of the world's leaders in offshore wind energy, particularly in the North Sea, and solar power continues to grow, even in our famously cloudy climate. At the same time as this growth, the UK's domestic supply of fossil fuels has been shrinking. Deep coal mining has virtually disappeared, with the last mine shutting in 2015, and oil and gas production in the North Sea has steadily declined since its peak in the late 1990s. As a result, the UK now imports a significant portion of its energy. This raises concerns about energy security and price volatility, meaning prices going up and down, or fluctuating if you like. This is especially exacerbated during global crises, like the Ukraine war with Russia. It's important to note that the demand for electricity and energy is set to increase even further, despite the rise of energy efficiency appliances. Now, quite simply, a growing number of households has led to an increase in the need for electricity and gas. With a population set to reach 75 million by 2050, this is a challenge that the UK will need to overcome. Let's dive a little deeper into the types of electricity that we can actually use, or energy sources if you like, because each one has its advantages and its drawbacks. First off, we have fossil fuels. Remember, these are coal, oil and natural gas. Now these are very reliable and energy dense, but they're also the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions like CO2 and air pollution. They're very finite, meaning they could run out, and their environmental cost is high, particularly if extracted in open cast mining for coal. Wind and solar are clean and increasingly cost effective, but they are intermittent. This means they are dependent on the weather and the time of day. This means we need storage solutions and backup systems to keep the lights on. These can significantly increase the costs, as the lithium-ion batteries and hydrogen fuel cells are extremely expensive. This is part of the reason why the UK still has to use natural gas to balance times that the electricity is needed but not available due to weather conditions. Wave and tidal energy offer huge potential, especially for an island nation like the UK. They're very predictable because the tide comes in and out every day, as does the waves generated by the tide. But the technology is still very expensive and can disrupt marine ecosystems. The tidal barrage scheme, or Dudgeon Estuary, is what's being discussed on the 2025 Paper 3 issue evaluation, so I'm sure you already understand lots about this. Geothermal energy provides a constant output with minimal emissions being created, but the UK's geology limits where it can actually be used effectively. But essentially we have hot water for free. Our last source of renewable energy is hydroelectricity. Now this uses the kinetic potential energy of water and releases it to turn turbines. This in turn creates a reliable source of electricity. In some cases the water can be pumped between 2 different reservoirs, almost like a giant water battery, storing electricity for when it's needed. This means that hydroelectricity can be extremely reliable, and the sites can be used for reservoirs and for nature. However, large areas of land behind the dam have to be flooded, and communities may potentially be displaced if they are forced to move. The dams are also extremely expensive and require quite a lot of maintenance costs. Then there's nuclear power. Now nuclear power produces large amounts of electricity with no carbon emissions, but it does come with very high upfront costs, costing billions of pounds, long construction times, and the challenge of managing radioactive waste. Now most geographers and scientists will agree, no single source can meet all of our needs. The future lies in a balanced mix, one that has to be clean, reliable and economically sustainable. Before we continue onto our questions for today, we are going to quickly talk about fracking, because fracking is something that is really important and is potentially going to come back in the UK. Fracking is short for hydraulic fracturing. Now, this was once seen as a way to boost the UK's gas supply. It involves injecting water, sand and chemicals into rock formations to release natural gas. Now, many supporters argue it could reduce our reliance on imports, creating jobs and lower energy prices, which remember are the main reasons for the cost of living crisis at the moment. But opponents point to the risks. It could lead to small earthquakes, potential water contamination, and strong public opposition. The water contamination part is something we are quite concerned about, because if the water is contaminated, it could lead to the destruction or lack of use of massive aquifers underground. Now, due to these reasons, in 2019, the UK government imposed a moratorium on fracking due to safety concerns. While some still advocate for its return, others see it as a distraction from the push towards renewables. Now, that word moratorium means a temporary ban. It's also important to note that fracking will not help us reach our net carbon zero carbon written by 2050. Achieving that 2050 goal will require innovation, investment and a commitment to sustainability by heavily investing in renewable energy. Now, it's important to note that this video ties well to climate change mitigation strategies for paper 1. I'll link that at the end of the video next to the paper 2 playlist. Okay, so we have 4 potential questions here today, but do remember again, they could be lots of different ones, so don't just be limited by these. The first question says, explain why nuclear energy has both advantages and disadvantages. In paper 2, it's quite likely you'd have a resource to back this up. Again, we'd go for 2 peel paragraphs. Then, the same for renewable energy, and you could use any of the renewable energy sources we discussed. Then fracking, to what extent should we essentially use it? This has actually been asked, I think it was back in 2019 on a paper 2 paper, and again we did have a resource to explain what it was. Then the fourth question would just be 1 peel paragraph, which is suggest why the demand for energy is increasing in the UK. Thank you for watching Bonhill Geography. I'll catch you in the next video.